Hi, I'm Mia Kang, and this is my lesson on lesson 5.2, the Phillips Curve for AP Macro. First off, I just want to go over what the College Board requirements are. You can pause if you want to take a look at this list, but I just have it here for reference, but I'll just skip over to the next slide. So I'm going to start by covering what the Phillips Curve is. So the Phillips Curve shows the relationship between the rate of inflation and the unemployment rate. So right here we have our short run Phillips Curve, or the SRPC, which you can see is downward sloping. So it shows that inverse relationship between our inflation and unemployment in the short run. And then our long run Phillips Curve, our LRPC, as you can see here, is a vertical line because it's always placed at the natural rate of unemployment here. So no matter what rate of inflation is, it'll always return to the natural rate of unemployment in the long run, which is why it's vertical. And then an important note, which we'll go over later about why this is so important, is that the economy is always operating at some point on the SRPC curve. So right here you can even see this is our long run equilibrium where SRPC and LRPC are equal to each other. And we're always operating on this curve here. So I just want to go over unemployment and inflation rate because we've seen these before, and how this is going to be, how can we relate the Phillips curve to everything that we've learned before. So primarily we're going to see this reflected in the ADAS model. And so here we have on this graph an increase in aggregate demand. So now we're in an inflationary gap. So what this is going to do is from the equilibrium point, we're going to be having an increase in price level and also an increase in our GDP. What we can see from price level is that inflation increases when price level increases. Those are kind of two the same things. Like when price level is high, inflation is also high. For our GDP, this relationship is a little bit, we have to go through a couple logic chains to figure that one out. So when our GDP is high, that means we're going to be producing more. So we're going to need more workers. And when we have more people working, that means that the rate of unemployment is going to be less. So in an inflationary gap, as we learned before, you've seen this in the ADAS model unit, in this graph, our economy has a lower rate of unemployment than the natural rate, which is the YE here, and then also a higher rate of inflation or price levels than in equilibrium. And so one of the main things about this Phillips curve unit is that the Phillips curve reflects the ADAS model. And you're going to see like the changes in unemployment and the changes in inflation are really going to stem from what you see in the ADAS model. So conceptually, it's important to understand the ADAS model first, and then know how unemployment and inflation are, how you can see those in the ADAS model if you want to really understand the Phillips curve. So in this one, we're going to first go over demand shocks. I think these are a little bit easier versus our supply. So there's supply and demand shocks, but we're going to go over demand first. So in our ADAS model, we're in our equilibrium right now. And then if I add a demand shock, our AD in this case is going to be increasing, so it's greater than it was before. So when we do this from our equilibrium point YE, or not YE, but our equilibrium point here in black, we can see that when we increase AD, the price level is going to go up and our GDP is also going to go up. So what's this going to say about our Phillips curve? Our price levels are increasing, so our inflation has increased, and then our GDP has increased. So our production has increased, our amount of workers has increased, so our unemployment has actually decreased. So on this Phillips curve model, how are we going to model this shift? Right now we're at equilibrium, and then if our inflation is increasing, or price levels are increasing, so inflation increases, we got to go up this way. We got to increase that. And then if our unemployment is decreasing because our GDP increased, then our unemployment value has to shift to the left. So we're going to go here, and that's going to be this point here on the SRPC curve. So where our economy is operating is going to shift along the SRPC curve here when we have a demand shock. And then supply shocks are a little bit tougher, but they're still manageable. So right here on our ADAS model, we have our shifted SRAS. This is an increase in SRAS. And when we have an increase in SRAS, our price level is going to decrease here, as you can see, to the pink. And our GDP is going to increase. So that's going to be a decrease in price level, so decrease in inflation, and then an increase in our GDP, which is also an inflationary gap. So we're going to have an increase in production, increase in working people, and so then a decrease in unemployment. So again, decrease in inflation rate and also a decrease in unemployment. So on our Phillips curve, this is a little bit harder to model. We're going to have our decrease in inflation, so we got to go down, and then our decrease in unemployment, which means we got to go to the left, which is going to put us at this point here, which is impossible to shift along the SRPC. You can't shift along the SRPC, the one that we have here, to this point here. So what we're going to have to do instead is we're going to have to shift the entire SRPC curve down, or to the left. So then now we have our decrease in inflation and our decrease in unemployment rate that you can see on the ADAS model is reflected on the Phillips curve. So basically the Phillips curve is going to reflect all the changes that you see on the ADAS model. So you're going to base your Phillips curve off of the ADAS model. And then for people who like to memorize with alliteration, I remember it this way. I think supply shifts, SRPC. So those S's, they kind of, supply shifts. So S is always together. And then it kind of just rolls off your tongue, so I feel like it's easy to memorize this one. And I'm going to do a quick comprehension quiz because that was kind of a lot, I think, to memorize. So before we move on to the last thing real quick. So this one is this economy operating, which is operating at point A, is it in a recessionary or an inflationary gap, and why? And I'll give you a couple seconds to just pause and take a moment to figure it out, or maybe you got it already. So the answer is that we are in a recessionary gap. And then how can we tell this? We can tell because if we're on the ADAS model, unemployment is greater than the natural rate in a recessionary gap. So because we're producing at a lower level, so we have less workers. So now all these people, there's less jobs available. So now they're going to be looking for more jobs, but they're still unemployed. So we can see that here, the natural rate is right here. And this would be our long run equilibrium right here. But we're producing at a rate greater than the natural rate of unemployment right here at UA on the SRPC curve right here at point A. And then if you didn't get that, I think you should probably go back. This was a little bit of comprehension from what we learned a little bit earlier. So I think you need to, if you didn't get that, you need to go back and make sure that you know that. And then the last thing is the shifters of LRPC. So there's really only one shifter of LRPC, which is when there's a change to the natural rate of unemployment. So since we know the natural rate of unemployment is frictional plus structural unemployment, we know frictional and structural unemployment are going to affect our NRU, so that might shift our LRPC. So really only frictional and structural employment, but just know that cyclical employment does not affect the LRPC. I mean, as you can see in the other graphs that we did, we were literally in recessionary and inflationary gaps, so that's where not our LRPC shifted, but something on the SRPC curve would change a little bit. And then I think it's kind of silly to memorize the shifters of SRPC because it's really more important that you understand the ADAS model, so I'm not even going to go over that because I think it's just, as long as if you learn what I taught earlier in this lesson, then you're set for shifters of SRPC. Okay, and then I just attached here in a list like everything covered in this lesson. So there's just a couple bullets there of everything we covered. And then now I'm going to move on to our practice problems. So I have 2 practice problems for us to do. And I think they have real world implications that'll help you out with thinking about these problems better for shifting graphs. So the first one is LinkedIn is a popular app for people to find job opportunities. So how did the introduction of LinkedIn affect the Phillips curve? So here on the Phillips curve, we can see that we're at equilibrium now. And LinkedIn is helping people find job opportunities. So what that's going to do is people who are in frictional unemployment, they're going to be able to find jobs faster. So there's going to be less people in frictional unemployment. And what that's going to do is decrease our natural rate of unemployment. So when we shift our natural rate of unemployment, then our LRPC is going to be shifting, right? So our LRPC is going to shift to the left, and our equilibrium point where LRPC and SRPC intersect is going to be our new point where an economy is operating. And then example problem number 2. The federal government implements a monetary policy by increasing the interest on reserves rate. How does this affect the Phillips curve? So we're going to start out here with our reserve market, and then just to note, we're going to assume we're in ample reserves because that's how our economy actually is, and it's not specified that we're in scarce reserves. So if the federal government increases interest on reserves rate, then our curve is going to shift upwards, and our interest rate is going to increase up to here. So how that's going to affect our ADAS model is that when interest rate increases, then consumer and investment spending decreases. So now our AD curve is going to shift to the left. So when we shift to the left here, now we can see that our price level has decreased and our RGDP has also decreased. So how that's going to affect our Phillips curve is our price level is decreasing. So when price level decreases, inflation decreases, so we're going to go down. And then when our RGDP decreases, our unemployment rate is going to increase. So we're going to go to the right, over here to this point here. And that's going to be our new point where our economy is operating on the Phillips curve. So I hope that helped. And thank you again. And good luck on AP Econ. That's all for this lesson.